Welcome to the Good Life Agoura Hills podcast. Join us each month as we discuss important city projects, programs, and initiatives with the community. We appreciate your support and thank you for tuning in.
All right, so welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, The Good Life Agoura Hills. I'm your host and Assistant City Manager, Ramiro Adeva. Now, as you know, on this podcast, we aim to bring you face-to-face with the amazing people doing great things in and for the city of Agoura Hills. Now, you might be asking, what's up with the new format? Well, it's not our normal format, but one we're using for today's interview, and I can honestly say how excited and honored I am to be speaking with our special guest. So, I'm honored and excited to be speaking with a New York Times best-selling author recognized for writing classics such as The Island of Sea Women, The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane, Snowflower and the Secret Fan, Peony in Love, Shanghai Girls, China Dolls, and Dreams of Joy. And if that wasn't enough, she's also the recipient of the Golden Spike Award from the Chinese Historical Association of Southern California and the History Makers Award from the Chinese American Museum. She was also named the National Woman of the Year by the Organization of Chinese American Women. And now, to top it all off, she can proudly say she's been on the Agoura Hills One City, One Book Tour. That's right. Woo woo. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me in giving the warmest podcast welcome to our guest today, the one and only Ms. Lisa C. Let's go. Everybody, clap it up. Clap it up. Lisa, how you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful.
Absolutely.
Great introduction. I'm psyched.
All right. So look, Lisa, you know that we have an event annually in Agoura Hills called One City, One Book, and the mayor each year gets to choose a book to feature. So this year's event is on Wednesday, October 30th. Mark that down, ladies and gentlemen. And on that day, Mayor Elise Buckley Weber has chosen to feature your latest novel, Lady Tan's Circle of Women. So that's super exciting. And I got to say, I read this book. I was on a Caribbean cruise for a family vacation. I read this book in a week, and it was amazing. So on that day, the community will also get a chance to hear from you firsthand. They'll get a chance to meet you, purchase their very own copy of the book, and even have you sign it. So this sit down with you and I,
right? Selfies too.
And take selfies. It's all about the selfies, right? So this sit down between you and I right now, Lisa, is sort of like a prequel to the main event on October 30th. So thanks again for being here. I appreciate your time.
Yes, I'm thrilled.
All right, so we're going to get into this. So, Lisa, according to Confucius, an educated woman is a worthless woman. Something tells me that sentiment doesn't sit too well given your background of being an educated, established, highly successful woman of Chinese American descent. So I want to kind of take this first question and focus on your background and maybe ask you to describe your background a bit and maybe give us a glimpse into your journey to becoming the author that you are today. And if you could, maybe sprinkle in something that we might not know about you.
Oh my gosh, that's so much right off the bat. Let's see if I can remember everything. So, I did grow up in Los Angeles in a very large Chinese American family. My mother's family was tiny, only about 10 people. Today there are only 4 left, I think. But my father's side of the family was quite large, about 400 people when I was a little girl. And the majority were still full Chinese. A small number looked like me, and then there was this spectrum in between. And so when I was a little kid, and my parents were divorced when I was 3, I spent a tremendous amount of time with my father's side of the family, with my grandparents, going to work with them in Chinatown and, like that. And so when I was a kid and I looked around me, what I saw were Chinese faces, what I experienced was Chinese culture, Chinese tradition, Chinese language, Chinese food. And that is, why I write the kinds of books that I do. Even though I don't look at all Chinese, but this was really how I was raised. And I would say, although I don't think that particular aphorism from Confucius was really said to me very much when I was a child, if at all, the one that really did kind of permeate the family was also from Confucius. When a girl, obey your father. When a wife, obey your husband. When a widow, obey your son. And actually, my grandfather used to say to my mother, you need to walk 10 paces behind your husband. That was never gonna fly with my mom. No wonder they got
Wow.
divorced. So I think that idea, of where women sort of sit in the world, was something that I did grow up with, and something that clearly I resisted. However, that said, I, in many cultures around the world, women are on a lesser plane, right? But they still have so much strength and power within the household, within the home, within the family. And so, my grandmother was an incredibly strong woman. My aunts, all of these women were so inspiring to me. And really, I can't say that they broke the mold, but they worked within this mold where they were quite fierce in their strength and their persistence and their endurance.
Love that. Thank you for that. And what about something that we might not know about you?
I can only type with 3 fingers. These
Oh my
3.
gosh.
So
Okay.
I've written now, I think I'm on my 13th book with just these 3 fingers.
That's amazing. All right. Where I was sitting there trying to tell my kids, okay, make sure you use 10. They're
Yeah.
going to say, well, I saw the Lisa C interview, so get off my back is what they're going to tell me.
Well, I remember, I think it's, I don't know, 7th, 8th grade, typing was an option in school, and my mom wouldn't let me take it.
Yeah, wow,
And,
okay.
and I don't want you to have that skill. And even though my mother was a writer, but my mother wrote everything longhand and
Okay.
would send it out to, somebody else to type.
All
I
right.
wished that I'd taken typing.
Yeah. I think you've done fine, with those 3 fingers. Okay. So Lisa, let's talk about the Mayor's One City, One Book selection. Like we mentioned, it's your latest book entitled Lady Tan's Circle of Women. Excellent book. I loved it. So now this story is centered around the main character, Tan Yunxian?
Jen. Perfect.
Yunxian. Um, I want to know what drew you to her story, and why did you choose her as the central figure in Lady Tan's Circle of Women?
Yeah. So you actually have to kind of scroll back about 5 years, maybe a little less now, when the pandemic hit. I had thought I'd be working on something else. I'd been kind of quietly doing research on it, but that particular book was going to require a trip deep, deep, deep into a very remote part of China. No way I could have done that then. China was virtually closed for about 2 years. So I was really at loose ends. I was home alone with my husband 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with really nothing to do. I never got on the banana bread kick. I did clean out some closets, but I just was kind of at loose ends, because I didn't have a project. And I'm not a very easy person to live with when I don't have stuff to do. Anyway, I have to say I didn't handle that time very well. I was really moping around, again, just because I just didn't know what to do with myself. And this is long before vaccines. They weren't even on the horizon. We didn't know what was going to happen. Was life going to be like this forever? So to make sort of a long story short, I was really moping around, feeling like, well, my life is over. It wasn't over, but there did come this day, and it wasn't until October of 2020. So a lot of months had gone by, and you can't see it, but on this wall over there, I have a whole wall of research books. And I was walking by, and the spine of one of them just jumped out at me. I don't know why. Gray jacket with slightly darker gray lettering, but it's like it jumped off the shelf into my hands. Reproducing Women, Pregnancy and Childbirth in the Ming Dynasty. And I opened it up. Not only had I had this book on my shelf for 10 years and had never read it, I had never even opened it before. But I thought to myself, here we are in the middle of a global pandemic. My life is over. I might as well sit down and start reading it right now. And so I did. I sat right over there, started reading, and I got to page 19. And there was a mention of a woman doctor, Tan Yunxian, who, when she turned 50, published a book of her medical cases in 1511. So I set the book down, I came over here, looked her up, and discovered that her book was still in print, not just in Chinese, but also in English. And so, although I'm a huge, huge, huge supporter of independent bookstores, on that day I may have ordered from Amazon and I had it within 24 hours. I typically think about an idea for 5, 10, 15, 20 years before I decide this is the one. This one, it was all of 26 hours. So, what was it that captivated me about her? A woman doctor 500 years ago. Think about how many professionally educated doctors there were in the world. Right. Yes, you had shamans, you might have had medicine men and women, but really not professionally trained physicians. So right there, that was extraordinary. When she turned 50, another fact I liked, published this book of her cases in 1511. And if you think about it, how many books are still in print from before 1511?
Yeah.
Nope,
Right.
the Bible, the
Right.
Iliad and the Odyssey, some Greek tragedies and comedies, and all of those written by men. So the fact that her book was still in print, everything about her just kind of obsessed me. And I, again, instead of thinking about this for years, it was all of about 26 hours.
Wow, that's amazing, inspiring. Okay, so let me just say that so Lady Tan's Circle of Women, it's another masterpiece, truly, of historical fiction, which you are a master of. And like we said, it follows the journey of Tan Yanxian,
Yes.
which is a journey of constantly being challenged to break free of societal expectations, particularly in the field of medicine.
Yes.
How do you navigate the blend of fact and fiction in your writing? And what liberties do you allow yourself when crafting the story and allowing some flexibility for creative storytelling?
What a really great question. So I did have some information about her life, and she wrote an introduction to her book, for example, that talks about her childhood and how she was sickly as a girl, and these different anecdotes about her life, but it's pretty limited. So I also did research kind of beyond her life to what life was like for women, what life was like living in one of these big family compounds. A lot of research about medicine in that time, particularly for women, so that there are stories in the novel, and I don't think this gives anything away, but I'll just mention three.
Right.
The story of the worm, the message that's written on the baby's foot, and what happens to the midwife in the Forbidden City. All of those things happened to real women. These were real stories. So they didn't happen to her, Tan Yanxian, but they did happen to real women. So what I tried to do is, her story is pretty limited, what's known about her, but to kind of fill in by using stories of the women of that time and what they went through. And then the last piece of that was that I had her medical cases. So there are several of, the little girl, the concubine's daughter, who's really her Tan Yanxian's first case when she goes to live with her husband, when she goes to her husband's compound. That's a real case. The women of the court who come to visit, and there are two of them have ailments, but also there's a daughter in another city who they're coming and asking questions about. Those are all three real cases. And of course, the tile maker, the brick and tile maker, and the woman who held the tiller on the ship, all of those were real cases. So, even though, like I said, what's known about her is kind of limited, there are all of her own cases which help to expand the story, plus the lives of women in that time.
It's amazing. So Lisa, in writing this novel, were there any parallels that you found between the experiences of women in Ming Dynasty China and in those of women today?
Oh, absolutely.
Right, yeah. How much time do we have?
I'm going to So it's called, Lady Tan's Circle of Women. And I was thinking of circles in kind of two ways. One is the circles of women, friends that we make. Sometimes it's family people, sometimes it's who you play tennis with, sometimes it's the parents in your kid's school. There are all these different circles that we have. But there was also this other circle that I was thinking about in regards to women. And I'm sure you noticed that, you have like every tier of economic tier of women in this book. So you have servants, concubines, wives, the spinster aunts, working, like working women, the tiller woman, the ladies of the court, all the way up to the empress. And I wanted to have all of those because it really doesn't matter if you were a servant in that time or the empress or somewhere in between, that all of those women were really linked by their physiology, right? And so, if you're pregnant, there are only a couple ways that baby's going to come out.
Right.
And here's the thing. This is what connects women across time, across cultures, across geography. It doesn't matter if it was 500 years ago, right now, today, or when we're all living on Mars. All women are connected by this unique biology and physiology. And I really wanted to really touch on that it doesn't, again, it doesn't matter how much money you make, how educated you are, we still are connected in this way.
Yeah, it's such an inspiring book, Lisa. I have a 12-year-old daughter who acts 21, but she, I find myself and my wife as well, we sit with her often talking about, how she can be anything she wants to be, right? That have no limits. And this book was so just a great inspirational story, especially at the time, to kind of just sit down and talk with her, which we did. Speaking on the lines of influence and inspiration, I would want to know who or what has been the biggest influence on you and your writing?
Oh, I'd have to say my mother. My mom was a writer. My mother's father, my maternal grandfather. I feel like I had, I'm this third generation, right? But I grew up around writers. I saw how they worked, and in particular, my mom, who, she was writing in the 60s. And was one of very few women out here on the West Coast who were writing and being published. And I saw, it was very hard for her at that time. And I have these very vivid memories of her sitting on the couch, talking to an editor on the phone for like a magazine article, and she'd just be crying because they were so mean to her because they could be. And that gave me, as I started coming up and doing magazine work and stuff like that, a kind of toughness that I can remember once, actually with my first book on Gold Mountain, the editor wrote the meanest letter to me, just so mean, just like over the top mean. And I remember thinking to myself, he doesn't know who he's dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If he's trying to scare me, he's made a big mistake.
Love it.
And I really got that from my mom. Plus just, writing 1,000 words a day, doing it day after day after day, just the work habits of it. So I do feel like I had a lifelong apprenticeship. Sometimes I joke around like, it's a good thing they weren't plumbers, but why couldn't they have been brain surgeons?
Yeah. I love it. Okay, so Lisa, on your website, there's a question regarding why you believe close friendships between women are important. And you answer in part by saying that you write about relationships between women because you are a woman, you want to connect with women, and because women's stories still need to be told. So with the amazing, illustrious career that you've had, with all the books you've written highlighting close friendships and relationships between women, do you still feel there is still more stories to be told?
My God.
If so, can you give us a glimpse into what those stories might be?
Yeah, we have to just take a step back for a second and think about how women really haven't been published for that long. You know, it's really, they're, you know, you can go back in time. You have Jane Austen, you have Emily Dickinson, you have Edith Wharton. You know, these are very few and far between, the Bronte sisters. And it's really not until 100 years ago when Virginia Woolf started publishing her fiction that women's writing starts getting published and it sticks.
Sure.
So that's not very long. And so I think we have only touched the tip of the iceberg of women's stories.
Love it.
There's so many things to write about and share, and the breadth of experiences and stories all around the world that we just don't know. And so, you know, I'm sure you saw on my website, you know, one of the things they say about me, what is it? I'm interested in stories that have been lost, forgotten, deliberately covered up. And I feel that very deeply, because for all of us to be here today, you know, we're on, even men, you know, we're on the shoulders of people who came before us, but we don't always know their stories. And so to me, that's what inspires me every day, is to try to find those stories and share them, and hope that they resonate with people.
Yeah, well, they do. They absolutely do. So if that's your goal, it's working. You're such an inspiration to people in general, and definitely, my gosh, to women. So very, very inspired by you. And listen, you amaze me. I am so, honestly, so honored to have this chance to speak with you and learn more about this fantastic book. Now, that said, I invite everyone, that means everyone, to mark your calendars right now. Pause, mark it down for Wednesday, October 30th at 6 p.m. at the Agoura Hills Recreation and Event Center, when Lisa C. herself will join us for a wonderful evening of conversation, taking questions from our live audience as we feature her latest book, Lady Tan's Circle of Women. So Lisa, I want to personally thank you for taking the time to be on our podcast, and you are absolutely amazing, and we appreciate your time. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested in learning more about all the cool things going on with Lisa C., you can visit her website at lisac.com. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast. Thanks again for tuning in, and you know how we do it here. So until we see you next time, we hope that you keep living the good life.
In Agoura Hills! Woo-hoo!
Yeah, thank you, and take care, everyone. Bye, everybody.
Catch up on previous episodes at AgouraHillsPodcast.com and hit that like button and subscribe to the Good Life Agoura Hills.